All right, Mason, let's take a look at the Orange Bowl. We're diving into some of these big bowl games that are coming up. And we've got the Orange Bowl, Georgia versus Florida State. That is Saturday, December 30th at 4 p.m. Orange Bowl is down there in Miami at the Hard Rock Stadium. We got some opt-outs here. We got some quitters, man. We got some quitters. Quitters quit. That is exactly right. Florida State's got Johnny Wilson out, Trey Benson out, Jared Verse out, Keon Coleman's out. Man, I mean, these are some big-time players here. Mm-hmm. And ever since the quarterback went down, Trey Benson has really been kind of that piece that they've been relying on. So I'm interested to see what Florida State goes to on offense, because ever since the quarterback was hurt earlier this season, this offense has just been anemic. It's been really, really bad. So far on Georgia's side, we're not seeing a ton of opt-outs yet, at least not publicly. What are your thoughts on the players that are sitting out? How is that going to affect the game? And just what are your thoughts on the game in general?
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. I wish that we saw a completely healthy Florida State versus Georgia. Obviously, as a college football fan, you want to see healthy on healthy sort of matchups, and you want to see a team at full strength. But this is just the day and age that we live in for bowl games, and it is what it is. What we have to do is focus on who's playing and try to make our judgment based on that, based on who we know is playing and who isn't. I still think that, this is a 14.5-point spread. Georgia should win pretty handedly. But there's, I saw, it was kind of interesting. I saw that there's actually a way that Florida State can claim a co-national championship if they win this game, based on a certain a certain I don't even know what you would call it, but like a certain system of ranking
criteria.
Yeah, it's like it's not the AP, but like a different criteria. I'm not really sure how that works.
That's how Alabama got to have like 18 or 20 of them things.
Yeah. So, but you claim what you can claim, and add it.
I guess
to the
if you lose
shelf.
3 or 4 games and you think you should be able to claim it, then you go right ahead.
Yeah. Because it's based on strength of schedule. So, but
I don't know what they're based on anymore, Mason.
I know. It's a shame, really, that we don't have a 12-team playoff this year, because that would just put everything to rest. I don't understand why they can't just say, you know what, we're going to do it this year. We're just going to go to 12 teams this year. Like, why couldn't that just be the announcement this offseason? Like, is it really that much? Do you really have to do that much to make it happen? I don't think so. TV networks would be on board, You'd have to, I mean, obviously you'd have to get all that stuff worked out, but hell, they still don't have that stuff worked out for next year. So we still don't know who's hosting or what network is doing the first round of the playoffs this coming year. So that's just a lot of feet dragging going on in my opinion.
They built the wall of China in like a year. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't tell me it's full of dead bodies of the people who worked on it.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's a fact.
Well, that's just being, smart and finding ways to get to expedite the process.
Bones are a very good foundation.
Yeah,
actually. Look, Georgia has been a really good passing attack this year. Florida State, I felt like the strength of their team whenever they had everybody was their offense their defense. And I felt like the offense was, they threw a lot of 50-50 balls and relied on the run game, right? Mm-hmm. With Jaheim Bell and Trey Benson as they used them, a lot of times lined them both up in the backfield. And whenever Florida State did that, I thought they were a pretty tough team to stop. This team is going to be a shell of its former self. Obviously, this Florida State has been in turmoil ever since the season ended. You could watch the clip on ESPN when Florida State figured out that they weren't in the playoff. And you saw Mike Norvell had his head in his hand. That is the attitude of the Florida State program right now, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. There's been leaks of videos, Trey Benson fighting current players on the team at bars in Tallahassee. There's a lot going on, man. Florida State's trying to leave the ACC, right? We'll get into that in just a second. Georgia, at a 14.5-point favorite, clearly has the advantage in this football game. And I'm going to rely on that as far as betting purposes go. If you're wanting to bet on this game, how could you bet on Florida State?
Yeah.
At this point. I mean, and listen, if you are in this game, here's a little helpful tip. Bowl games these days, you got to wait right until basically kickoff to place your bet, or bet it in game after you know who's playing. So, because I mean, Brock Bowers is not going to play in this game more than likely for Georgia, right?
But we don't know that, right? And that's kind of what you're getting at.
Right. We have no idea. We
Yeah.
have no idea. We haven't heard from Brock Bowers himself. We're not going to hear until it's time to play the game.
Yeah.
And so it makes these games really hard to bet on. So bet if you dare.
Yeah.
But I like Georgia big in this game, and I think they can cover the 14.5. I think Florida State is just in shambles.
I do too. And I think that it's an easy excuse to say, well, our 6 best players are opted out, you know. So we might have won the national championship, but our 6 best players opted out, you know, and
our players are sitting out.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be the easiest thing to do for Florida State just to lay down.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And you know, I just like you. I mean, if this game's going to go anyway, from a betting perspective, I think it's more likely that Georgia blows out Florida State than Florida State's able to keep it close.
Yeah.
Keep it, you know, to a 1-score game or something like that. Georgia on the other side, you know, Georgia's not going to do anything to run the score up. They're going to play conservative if they get up. They're not looking to they don't have to make a name for themselves in this game. So they're going to want to get out healthy. They want to get players in who they're looking forward to playing next season. And that's kind of what bowl games are for a lot of teams. Look, if you're not making a bowl game, you're missing an opportunity to get better and to get 15 extra practices in and to bring your early enrollees into those practices and start getting them acclimated. So that's what Georgia's focused on is looking ahead to what they've got next year. And they've done a really good job of building a culture and letting guys know, like, hey, it's really not okay to opt out in these games, especially if you're, you know, looking to play next year. We want to see what you can do, you know, for a lot of the freshmen who maybe didn't get snaps all season. You know, the bowl games are a perfect opportunity. And on the other side for Florida State, they've got a lot of open opportunities now with these guys opting out for young talent to step in and show what they can do. So you'll get a lot of fire out of those guys. They just don't have a lot of experience. So there could be a lot of ups and downs with that.
Well, I think we're starting to notice a trend. I feel like the teams, and maybe I'm totally wrong on this. This is completely my opinion, and this is mine and Mason's channel, so we get to express that freely. These teams that are solely relying on the transfer portal, it seems like they're more apt to fall apart coming down the stretch. And I'm just saying that from a 30,000 foot view here. We saw it with Ole Miss last year. I mean, a fairly epic falling apart of Ole Miss coming down the stretch the last 4 games of the year or whatnot. We kind of things didn't go Florida State's way. I feel like there was a ton of divas in that locker room, man.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there was a ton of just, and I may be wrong on that. I'm not a Florida State insider, but it seems like the teams that are more basing their talent acquisition on the portal are more apt to fall apart coming down the stretch. Now, let's transition over into another thought. Well, actually, one more thing about Georgia. Carson Beck's playing, right? Kendall Milton's playing. Okay, there's a couple of obviously big pieces on that offense. You said Cedric Van Pran, the center, is going to be playing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a first-round pick right there. Yeah. That's decided to play in the bowl game, at least to this point. And this is, December 24th here that we're recording this. Defensively, you've got guys that have decided to come back to Georgia. and play another year. They're going to be playing in the game. Georgia hasn't announced any opt-outs.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's not completely uncommon. Like I said, it could be game time decisions for some of this stuff. But I just wanted to throw that in there. It does seem like Georgia is going to be, they're going to have a higher percentage of their playmakers versus, what Florida State is dealing with. Now, let's kind of get into this ACC thing for just a minute, and let me kind of dress this whole thing out. Last year, we saw Florida State wanting to get out of the ACC. Everybody remembers Florida State was even in touch with companies like JP Morgan to figure out, hey, JP Morgan, Mr. Money Guy. They went and talked to Goldman Sachs and shit, dude. Like, they were like, what can we do to get this money and get the hell out of the ACC? So they were already trying to get out. And then all this happened with the playoff. So it's done shook everybody up. Well, they have a board of directors meeting this week. They call an emergency board of directors meeting, and they all vote that they're going to try to take legal action against the ACC and the grant of rights deal that the ACC has got all ACC teams locked up in. Now, this, from what I understand, the grant of rights is located in Charlotte, North Carolina. Nobody's even allowed to have a copy of this damn thing. You have to go fly there, drive there to go see it in person, blah, blah, blah. So that's happened several times to go look at the contract and all that. This seems like an airtight contract to me. I don't understand how Florida State gets out of this thing, Mason. I don't see it happening. I know Florida State, it's not like there's some kind of broke-ass program or something. I'm not saying that. But this is going to cost a ton of money to them, to ESPN. Don't F with Disney, bro.
Yeah.
Don't F with Disney and their money, bro.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry. Florida State is not smarter than Disney. They're not.
Yeah.
They knew what they were doing getting them to sign this grant of rights. It is binding. They're locked in. I don't think they're going anywhere, bro. It's going to cost a couple $100 million if they were to figure out a way to weasel out of this thing. And from what I understand, even if they do weasel their way out of it, they're not going to be able to televise home games for a while. They wouldn't even be able to televise their home games for a while. Now, the thought is the ESPN has a contract with the ACC.
Yep.
Maybe if the Florida State decided to go to the SEC, who ESPN also has a contract with, maybe ESPN and Disney would be more apt to allow something like that to happen. What are your thoughts on all this now that we kind of dress it out and what's going on here? This is the first time we've ever seen any team in the ACC try to beat this grant of rights.
Yeah.
This is the first time we've seen it. So we don't know that it can happen. We don't know that it can or cannot happen. We don't know that for a fact. But there's a reason nobody's tried it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and so we don't know what's going to happen. We know that if they are able to beat it, there will be a huge ripple effect. But nobody's really ever beat a grant of rights deal out of any conference, right? What's likely going to happen is they're going to end up settling for less money. But even if that happens, we're not talking about Florida State being in the SEC in 2025. We're talking about 2026 at the earliest. Yeah. So there's a lot that goes into it. I don't think that ESPN would has much incentive, even if Florida State goes to the SEC, to allow this to happen, because it diminishes the value of the ACC as a whole. And that's a whole product, that's a whole product line for them. Why would they just get rid of that for one team? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So, and then you got to, you already know that the SEC and ESPN are in bed together. So would the SEC even want that? Maybe there's a little bit of a feeling of loyalty to your TV network, and maybe you don't want to allow them to go past ESPN and into the SEC. There's a lot. I think that a lot of this stuff will start unfolding as we go into the off season, but I don't see anything happening in the near future. I just there's no way when you get into these legal battles like this, we're going to be talking about this in 2025, in my opinion.
Well, here's my thoughts on kind of some of the things that you just said. Can the SEC allow the Big Ten to come in and poach Florida State? Say they beat this thing, okay? Say they get it in court and they figure out a way to beat it, and you're right, it's not happening anytime soon. It's going to be at least a year before we get any kind of news, like actual news, concrete news on this. And then it's probably going to be another year before they can leave the league, I would think, right?
Mm-hmm.
But is the SEC going to sit idly by while their rival? I mean, it's no secret, Mason, that this college football world that we live in, it seems like it's coming down to two conferences.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it really seems like. If you talk to Chip Kelly, he says we should just have one. Maybe we'll talk about that here in a second. He had some crazy ass comments the other day, but I don't think the SEC wants the Big Ten being able to recruit the state of Florida like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really big deal.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that the SEC, if given the opportunity, would jump on Florida State. And let me tell you this right now. Florida State figures out a way out of this thing. Guess who's right behind them?
Miami.
Clemson. Miami.
Well, yeah.
All the big programs of the ACC, they'll all be out.
Yeah.
Miami's got more money than all of them, Mason.
Mm-hmm.
They got a damn health fund that's got about $3 billion in it.
Yeah.
Like, they can buy their way out of anything. It's not the fact that they can't buy anything. It's the fact that there's legal binding shit that is keeping them in that conference. And that's my concern. I heard all about this past offseason coming into the season. Well, they've got till so-and-so date. They don't have to be in that conference no more. Well, guess what? They were still in it. And I know damn well they didn't want to be.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we say with this stuff, yeah, well, where there's smoke, there's fire. But with one, I think it might just be a bunch of bullshit smoke.
Yeah.
We'll see. Look, as a SEC guy, I would obviously not mind Florida State coming and playing in the SEC. The more the merrier at this point. Chip Kelly, I kind of teased it just a second ago. We talked about Chip Kelly and his comments. He said we just need to have one conference.
Yeah.
And there is no divisions. It's random. You take all the Power 5 teams, put them in one conference, and they randomly play one another, which is just a bizarre ass thing to say.
Yeah.
From a college football coach. I mean, it doesn't. That makes no sense. That's not a good idea. Okay. I'm not sure what he was getting at with that. I'm sure he had some kind of underlying point that he was trying to make there, but the point was, it sounded like your crazy uncle at Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
We just need to have one world government.
Yeah.
It's like, well, dude, shut the hell up. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants one big conference. But I do think we're trending our way to two. Would the SEC step in and swipe Florida State up if they thought that the Big Ten was sniffing around? And furthermore, Mason, I'll add on to that question. Would Florida State be interested in the Big 12 possibly if it was the only option?
That's what Florida State fans don't want, right?
That's what they're scared of.
They would rather stay in the ACC if they knew that it was going to stay where it is. I think. I think if they know, and that's the issue, is it's the SEC can't go in and start talking to Florida State right now. That they're not allowed to do that until they're out of their contract. So. Right. The Big Ten can't either. So, and that's I think what's scary is taking that leap of faith if you're Florida State.
Yeah. And are you willing to pay cut? Because are you going to be like Oregon and Washington or SMU and take a sweetheart deal to go into a conference? Are you going to do the Shohei Ohtani thing, right? Where it's like, yeah, that's cool. Just give me a little bit and get my beak wet, in between. And then pay me the $100 million a year you're giving the rest of these schools in 5 years or 8 years. Can Florida State even sustain that?
Yeah. Well, what's really interesting to me though is the SEC hasn't like Florida State hasn't been in talks of moving into the SEC up to this point. Like weirdly, it's been Virginia and what is it, like UNC?
Yeah.
I think were the two markets that they were looking at. So it hasn't been Clemson or Florida State or Miami. And that's what is it has been really surprising to me. And so now all of a sudden it's Florida State, who's looking at backing out, and I'm not hearing anything from the SEC side of things.
I feel like we're all getting to a point where it's like not only like you can say what you want to say. You're like a little bit of a fan and kind of root for the conference that your team is in usually. I mean, that's just like kind of typical of college football fans. And I think it's really old fashioned and traditional. I think it's awesome. It's part of what makes this sport awesome, right? Um, but I feel like now these TV networks have got us like rooting for a TV network.
That's funny.
You know what I mean? Think
Yeah.
about it. And we ain't making a damn dime off of none of it.
Yeah.
And we're over here saying, well, so-and-so can pay so-and-so. And that's kind of how we're linking things together, which is accurate. Money talks, bullshit walks. We all know that. But it's just funny how they've got us programmed to this point where we're kind of like, okay, well, ESPN's over here. It's not the SEC anymore. It's the SEC and ESPN. It's the ACC and ESPN. It's the Big Ten and Fox. I mean, hell, Joel Klatt don't even like the damn SEC, and he's a college football analyst, right? Yeah. I mean, it's wild. It's so wild, the world that we're living in. But welcome to 2023, 2024, soon to be.